Have you ever been talking with religious friends and the topic of the rapture comes up? It's a really popular idea, often seen in movies and books, depicting people suddenly vanishing from the earth. But where did this idea actually come from? And more importantly, is it what the Bible teaches? Today, let's take a closer look at the doctrine of the rapture and compare it to the scriptures. The concept of the rapture is a key part of a broader theological system called premillennialism. This particular teaching isn't ancient. It actually dates back to the 1830s and is largely credited to a man named John Nelson Darby. The core idea is that Jesus will secretly return for the church. The believers who have passed away will be resurrected, and along with living believers, they will be judged. Immediately after this secret rapture, a 7-year period of immense suffering, known as the Great Tribulation, will begin on earth. During this time, the epic Battle of Armageddon is said to occur. After these 7 years, the teaching goes, Jesus will return for a third time, defeat the Antichrist, establish a physical throne in Jerusalem, and rule over the entire planet for a literal 1,000 years. Now, many sincere people believe this, but when we hold this doctrine up to the light of the Bible, several significant problems emerge. Let's break them down one by one. First, the idea of a secret coming. The rapture doctrine hinges on Jesus returning silently, known only to the believers who are taken. However, the Bible paints a very different picture. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 says, "For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of an archangel, and with the trumpet of God." A shout, an archangel's voice, and a divine trumpet blast that sounds anything but secret. Furthermore, Revelation chapter 1 verse 7 is incredibly clear. "Behold, he is coming with clouds, and every eye will see him." Every eye. This describes a universally visible, public, and unmistakable event, not a clandestine operation. The Bible consistently portrays the second coming of Jesus as a glorious, visible, and audible event for the entire world to witness. The second major issue is the number of comings. The rapture theory requires at least 2 more returns of Christ, the secret one for the church, and then a third one after the tribulation. But the Bible speaks of only one future return of Christ. The scriptures describe a single, final event. When he returns, several things happen simultaneously. The dead are resurrected, as John's Gospel tells us. The faithful who are still alive will be caught up to meet the Lord in the air, according to 1 Thessalonians. The earth as we know it will be destroyed by fire, as Peter describes, and we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, as Paul writes to the Corinthians. All of these climactic events are tied to a single return of the Lord. There's no biblical support for a third coming. This leads us to the third problem: too many resurrections. Rapture theology proposes 2 separate resurrections, one for the saints before the tribulation, and another for the wicked 1,000 years later. But let's look at what Jesus himself said in the Gospel of John, chapter 5. He says, "Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice, and come forth those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation." Notice, Jesus speaks of the hour, a single point in time when all who are in the graves will come forth. He doesn't separate them by 1,000 years. He describes one general resurrection event where both the righteous and the unrighteous are raised to face their respective destinies. The fourth problem is about Jesus establishing a physical kingdom and reigning on earth. The rapture doctrine claims Jesus will physically return to sit on a throne in Jerusalem and rule for 1,000 years. This stems from the idea that when Jesus came the first time, his primary goal was to set up an earthly kingdom. The theory goes that when the Jewish people rejected him, he put that plan on hold and established the church as a sort of plan B then. At his future return, he'll finally get to implement plan A and set up his physical kingdom. But is this what the Bible teaches? First, the scriptures state that Jesus will not set foot on this earth again. 1 Thessalonians 4 says, "We will meet him in the air." And 2 Peter chapter 3 says, "The earth upon which we now live will be destroyed and pass away with a great noise." If the earth is destroyed at his coming, how can he then reign on it for 1,000 years? More importantly, let's look at the distinction between the church and the kingdom. Are they 2 different things, a plan B and a plan A? In Matthew chapter 16, Jesus says to Peter, "On this rock I will build my church." And in the very next verse, he says, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." Jesus uses the terms church and kingdom interchangeably. He wasn't discussing two separate institutions. They are one and the same. The church asterisk is asterisk the kingdom of Christ in its current spiritual form. When was this kingdom established? Acts chapter 2 describes the day of Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit was poured out and the church was born. That was the day the kingdom came into existence, just as Jesus had prophesied. Decades later, the Apostle Paul wrote to the Christians in Colossae and said that God has delivered us from the power of darkness and conveyed us into the kingdom of the Son of His love. Paul speaks of the kingdom in the past tense. The Colossian believers were already asterisk in asterisk the kingdom. How could they be placed into something that didn't exist yet? This shows us that the kingdom is not a future earthly reign, but a present spiritual reality that believers enter when they follow Christ. So, while the second coming of Christ is a foundational and hope-filled truth of Christianity, a doctrine we must absolutely hold on to, the specific theory of the rapture, as formulated in the 1830s, presents serious conflicts with what the Bible actually says. It proposes a secret coming when the Bible describes a visible and audible one. It requires multiple future comings and resurrections, where the Bible speaks of one final return and one general resurrection. And it separates the church and the kingdom when the Bible presents them as one. Understanding these distinctions is vital for having a clear and biblically grounded hope for the future. The promise isn't a secret escape, but a glorious, world-encompassing return of our King. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this look into the Scriptures was helpful and gave you something to think about. If you found this valuable, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives into biblical topics. See you next time.